We all hate it, but it keeps coming back. Time gating might be the most hated game mechanic of all time. Whether you're limited to how many drops of a weapon you could get per week, to having to wait a number of weeks just before being able to play a new activity, it shows up everywhere in the game. Okay, so yeah, players hate it, but are there any legitimate reasons why it exists? Are there any alternatives that could be used instead to achieve a similar result? Let's find out. Hey everyone, I'm Rizeki, and welcome to my design analysis of time gating in Destiny 2. As always, I appreciate you for checking out the video. If you end up enjoying it, don't forget to subscribe and drop a like to let me know, and to be notified for future uploads. I try to do weekly videos about Destiny 2 design, as well as a number of shorts throughout the week, so definitely stick around and check them out. With all that out of the way, let's get to talking about time gating. To start off, I want to quickly go over the reasons why time gating may be added to a game. Don't worry, I'll get to why players hate it in a second, but there must be some justification from a game design perspective, right? Like I usually do, let's make a top 3 list for possible justifications for time gating from a developer's perspective. A quick reminder that Destiny 2 is a free-to-play MMO, so some of these reasons are related to that. I'm also going to be playing devil's advocate a bit, and we'll be talking about the issues in a minute, so don't get mad at me just yet. So here we go. Time gating, for 1, spreads out content to prevent droughts. 2, creates a reason for players to log in each week. And 3, prevents player burnout. Now, let's talk about each of these one by one. The most obvious reason for time gating is to spread out content to prevent content droughts. This might be the biggest issue facing Destiny, as players are grinders. New god tier weapon, you bet players are going to log in as soon as they can to get the best rolls ASAP. What ends up happening is players will get everything they can, and then just be done with the activity. Bungie needs players to log into the game regularly to keep the game alive. If a majority of players get all the crafting patterns from a new season within a single week, well, they're going to be less likely to feel the need to play in the future. And if we look at a season like Season of the Wish, there's still going to be another, 29 more weeks to go? If the weapon patterns are instead spread out over the course of a few more weeks, maybe one per weapon, bringing it to about 5 weeks to get all the patterns, that's 5 times as long those players are going to be logging in regularly for. And that also means less content Bungie needs to prepare in advance, which keeps workloads lower and the overall quality of the resulting releases better. In theory, of course. You'll notice these 3 reasons are pretty similar to each other, so I'm not going to repeat myself too much if I can avoid it. Our second point is about giving players something worth logging into each week. Developers want to keep players entertained as long as possible, especially in games as a service titles. So giving players quality content regularly keeps them logging in. If you log in and there's nothing worth doing, you're just going to Alt F4 and play a different game instead. Not good for Bungie. So they need to release content regularly to keep players entertained. Finally, player burnout is a real issue. Like I said before, Destiny players are grinders. They will play the game until they fall asleep at their keyboards. Once a player burns out, they are again going to be less likely to log in the next day. If I'm sick of playing the game, why would I play the game in the first place? Bungie needs to keep players playing, so preventing burnout is a key factor in the design of certain systems. Time gating specifically will prevent players from exerting themselves too much on the same content over and over, so when the new content is released, they will have a fresh outlook on the game. If the game feels even a little bit fresh, it helps to keep players interested and less bored. So you may have noticed, but all these points focus around a single core point. Bungie needs to keep players playing the game to make money. Games as a service are just that. You play the game, and you pay the devs for the time you spend doing so. If a player chooses to no longer play the game for one reason or another, Bungie, or any other GAS developer for that matter, will ultimately lose money. That player who doesn't log in won't buy cosmetics, the new expansion, the new skimmer, or the new season pass. Time gating is a method to keep players logging into the game regularly, which in turn will make them more likely to spend money on the game. Of course, there are some possible benefits to players, such as preventing burnout, but mostly time gating is only beneficial to the game company, at the expense of the players. It's very one-sided. And when I say one-sided, I mean players hate time gating, myself included. As a game developer myself, I recognize the potential reasons for it, but that doesn't change my feeling as someone who actively plays the game. But why is time gating hated so much by players? Let's do the classic 3-reason list again to hit the big reasons. So time gating locks content you paid for, reduces the overall amount of playable content in the game at any given time, and actively punishes players who want to grind out the game. I think a huge reason that time gating sucks is because you literally don't have access to content you paid real money for. Oh, you bought the season pass? Well, you only get one story mission a week. But didn't I pay for all 9 to 10 story missions? Why can't I just play it now? And that kind of just feels bad. If you pay for something that promises X, Y, and Z, then you should be able to access X, Y, and Z as soon as it's supposed to launch. It's like buying a sandwich for lunch, but you can only eat the bread. Then an hour later, you get the roast beef, and then after waiting another hour, you finally get the lettuce and tomato. Just let me eat the freaking sandwich now. I bought the whole thing. All this to say is that time gating paid content is overall just a feels bad moment for the player who purchased that content. What's maybe a bigger reason is how time gating literally reduces the amount of playable content in the game, or that it reduces the amount of replayability a new activity might have. If we look at Into the Light, the Brave Arsenal weapons are locked behind weekly resets, and there is a ton of loot to collect from the Brave Arsenal. If during week 1 I can only get maybe 2 or 3 weapons total, I'll play Onslaught for a few hours, get the rolls I'm looking for, and then just stop playing. There's no reason to play more since I already earned all the loot available. Sure, I'll have a reason to log in next week, but wouldn't it be better to just keep me playing the game by providing me with more replayability value? This also applies to systems like the Nightfall Rotator, the Exotic Mission Rotator, and others. Let me grind out or just play the activities I want to play. If the only reason I want to play Destiny today is to play Vox Obscura for some reason, but the current weekly rotator is Presage, I'm not going to log in this week. Reducing the amount of available content in the game sucks, and might have the opposite effect of giving players a reason to log in each week. This is another big one. If I want to grind out Root of Nightmares for that sweet, sweet conditional finality drop chance, well, I get 3 chances per week if I have 3 characters on my account. Once you do it 3 times, you're done. You're actively punished for wanting to grind, and ultimately punished for wanting to play the game in the first place. If a player wants to grind, let them grind. Let them enjoy their favorite looter shooter in the way that only a looter shooter can be enjoyed. Preventing players from grinding the game for loot seems so counterproductive to the whole reason for the game's existence in the first place. When Prophecy was reprised, and we were able to grind it out limitlessly, that was awesome. I probably played that dungeon at least 30 times that week, and sure, I got bored eventually, but I sunk a lot of time into the game that I normally wouldn't have. And guess what? I came back the next week to play it all over again, albeit with only 3 possible looted runs. So much for preventing burnout. We looked burnout right in the face and said, yeah, I don't care, I want that God roll prosecutor, and played the heck out of the game anyway. If Bungie wants to keep players invested, they should reward those who spend time in the game, not actively fighting against them from doing so. With both sides of the time gating issue sorted, what could be done to improve, or better yet, replace time gating altogether? I think some of these might be liked by the player base, but some of them also might not be liked at all. You can let me know what you think below. These are, after all, just some ideas for possible ways to improve while maintaining the current goal of what time gating does. For one, we could remove time gating and replace it with a more grinding experience overall. What do I mean by this? If the goal of time gating is to keep players playing regularly, then highly desirable loot should require more time to obtain, while not outright preventing it from being obtained. For example, a crafted weapon requires you to first find 5 patterns, or better known as the red border versions of the weapon, in order to unlock the crafted version. If a weapon has a deep sight drop rate of about 20%, that means for every 5 weapons you find, you should, on average, get 1 red border version. To make it take longer to obtain the pattern, we could do a number of things. We could reduce the deep sight drop rate, we could reduce the overall weapon drop rate, or we could increase the length of the activity that rewards that weapon. Look at the coil. To get the best rewards, you typically need to spend upwards of 45 minutes to finish the activity. 45 minutes is a lot of time. But if you're looking for a specific drop from that activity, then you'll probably just hop back in for another 45-minute adventure. You're spending more time playing the game. Or maybe you decide to just come back the next day to play again for another chance. You have the freedom to choose how long you play, when you play, but overall, you are still spending more time playing the game. And that's exactly what Bungie is probably trying to achieve with time gating anyway. Another option is to keep time gating, but increase the amount of content given per release. Not a perfect option, but if Bungie is adamant on spreading out the content to prevent a drought, it might be an okay compromise. What if the weekly seasonal missions were twice as long, rewarded you more for your time? You would probably feel better about the amount of content available at any given time. Maybe for the Brave Arsenal, Bungie could release 2 or 3 new weapons per week instead of 1. Again, not perfect, but there would be a bit more replayability for Onslaught each week, so players would have more to do. In addition, Bungie could remove the Nightfall and Exotic Mission rotators, or even just add 1 more per week. So instead of only having Ghost of the Deep as the weekly featured dungeon, make Ghost, Prophecy, and Pit of Heresy the featured dungeons that week. There's still the limitation of those 3, but it's way more content than just being allowed to grind out a single dungeon. Finally, Bungie could opt to give us just less limitations per week. If I could loot Nezarec for conditional finality 3 times per character per week, that's a lot better than only 3 times per week total. Yeah, I'm still restricted in how much I'm allowed to loot a particular activity, but at least I have a little bit more control over how much I personally want to grind the game instead of having it dictated to me by Bungie. Easing up on the limitations on players could at least keep those players engaged for longer per week, instead of over the course of many weeks. I think players would not only play more per week, but they would play more every week, especially if they are targeting specific loot. It accomplishes Bungie's goal of keeping players logging in regularly, but also could over-accomplish it since players would be, well, spending more time playing the game each week on average. With everything said, Timegating is honestly a dated solution to keep players logging in regularly. It's kind of a carrot on a stick approach, whereas you could have a much better solution by just giving players the whole carrot, with the option to have more if they choose to. I understand the reasons for Timegating, some of which may possibly benefit players, but giving freedom back to the players will ultimately increase engagement overall. Frustrated players are probably not going to want to play the game anyway. Keeping mechanics that actively hinder and frustrate players seems to be the antithesis to good game design, and should be improved in some way. Reducing the restrictions of Timegating, whether that's just releasing more content at once, adding more lootable runs, or just straight up removing Timegating entirely in favor of changing the loot reward structure in some way, are just a few ways that this could happen. If you made it this far into the video, thanks a ton. I would love to hear your personal thoughts on Timegating in Destiny, and really any game for that matter, in the comment section down below, or over in our Discord server, linked in the video description down below. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like to get more videos just like this one sent straight into your YouTube feed. But I think that's all I've got for now. As always, I've been Rizeki, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.